Good evening. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Lakewood City Council in Lakewood, Colorado on October 9th, 2017 at 7 p.m. in chambers. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Hall.
Here.
Coop.
Here.
Wickman. Here. Gutwein.
Here.
Franks.
Here.
Harrison.
Here.
Royball.
Here.
Vincent.
Here.
Abel. Here. Johnson.
Here.
Shakti.
Here.
You have a quorum.
All right. Well, welcome everybody tonight. Thank you for coming out. And thank you to those who may be tuning in via Channel 8 or online. I'd like to start this evening with the Pledge of Allegiance, and if you'd please remain standing for a moment of silent prayer, that'd be great. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. All right. So I'll just read item 4 into the record, and that is a proclamation recognizing John Zabawa. Made it just in the nick of time. Come on down. Come on down, John. This is really cool. I'm glad that we're able to do this tonight.
Thank you.
So thank you for being here. All right, proclamation recognizing John Zabawa's service to older adults. Whereas John Zabawa served as president and CEO of Seniors Resource Center for more than 35 years. And whereas under John's leadership, the Senior Resource Center has helped seniors live independently and improve their quality of life. And whereas John has been instrumental in establishing programs for seniors such as in-home care and services, transportation, mental health care, and adult day centers. And whereas the City of Lakewood has benefited from a long-term partnership with the Seniors Resource Center, which puts both organizations in a better position to meet the transportation needs of our residents. And whereas, because of John's commitment to helping seniors, Seniors Resource Center will continue to be Lakewood's #1 referral in assisting our adult populations. And whereas John has retired, although he will continue to serve the seniors of our community, you never get to retire, will continue to serve the citizens of our community through his appointment as a member of Governor John Hickenlooper's Strategic Action Planning Group on Aging. Now, therefore, on behalf of the City Council and the people of the City of Lakewood, I, Adam Paul, Mayor of the City of Lakewood, do recognize John Zabawa's service to older adults. Very cool. Congratulations. Thank you. You would like? Come on. You got a free mic.
Thank you, Mayor Paul, and thank you to the members of the City Council for this recognition. You know, I very much appreciate the recognition, but more importantly, I appreciate the city's commitment to its older adult residents. And, you know, Seniors Resource Center could not do the work that we do without the valuable partnerships that we have, certainly the City of Lakewood being one of those. The reality is our population continues to age. It represents a greater percentage of our citizens and will continue to do so. We're looking at a 580,000 number of older adults over the course of the next 10 years. That's a huge number. So we need to plan as communities as to how we're going to create a very supportive environment that allows our older adults to age with dignity, with independence, and to create communities that really do support our older adults and recognize them as continuing contributing members of society. So I thank you for this recognition. I thank you for the support you have provided to the Seniors Resource Center, and look forward to our continued partnership. Thank you.
Mayor Paul, while you're walking up, we have another celebrity in the audience here, Kathy Stapleton, a past Ward 5 City Councilor and also past president of the Senior Resource Center Board. So, hi, Kathy.
Counselor Johnson.
Thank you. Several years ago, I was subcontracted out to do Medicaid supervisory visits for SRC. And that's when I first became acquainted with you, John. And it's true, you've been fighting quite the fight to help seniors remain in their home and have the services that they need ongoing. You've made a real legacy for yourself, and I appreciate what you've done. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Johnson. I would echo that too, and the fact that when you see the senior resource and the amount of transportation alone that you provide, and throughout the whole metro area and in the mountain counties, it's really cool. And one thing I learned in this journey is the respite care, that provides people a break who may be caregivers. And so there's so many things that the Resource Center provides. In 35 years, you should be very, very proud. So thank you, sir. Will the clerk please read item 5?
Item 5, presentation, citizen commendation.
Chief McCaskey. And you are all welcome to come down or come behind here if you want to take pictures from behind, if that's easier. Make yourself at home.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I'd like to introduce you to Mara Wilkes. And we have a citizen's commendation for her. On May 31st, 2017, Mara and her children were enjoying an afternoon at the swimming pool. About 45 minutes later, her friend and her 3-year-old toddler, who we have here with us tonight, they removed her vest and they started home to take a nap. Meanwhile, Mara's daughter had cut her foot, and so both mothers were distracted trying to apply a bandage to the daughter's foot. And this young lady got out of her chair and got it back into the swimming pool. So Mara's friend immediately realized that her daughter wasn't in sight and turned and found her floating in the swimming pool and just under the surface face down. So the mother jumped into the pool and pulled the daughter out of the water, and then Mara began life-saving efforts. She noticed the child's face was purple in color, and so she began CPR while the mother called 911. After about 10 chest compressions and 2 breaths, the child began breathing again, started to cry, and she was fine. And the paramedics arrived and transported her to a nearby hospital. And so, as you can see, she's doing well. She's healthy, and thanks to Miss Wilkes, she saved her life. And so, it's an honor today to present her with a citizen commendation. So,
Great.
So. I think Mars, I told her she didn't have to speak today. She's pretty nervous up here, but she's a true hero, and what a life-saving effort. And we're so honored to have her here today and have this young child with us too. So thank you, Mara. You're a true hero, so thank you.
Yep. Congratulations. We're all very, very proud of you and everybody who was a part of that. And your actions speak for themselves. You don't have to worry about not speaking tonight. So thank you. All right. Next up, we have public comment. And this is the point in the meeting where the public is invited to address the city council on items that did not appear on the agenda. All comments should be directed to the city council. I'll ask all in attendance to observe the decorum in city council chambers, refrain from applause or audible support or discord with the speaker. There is a 3-minute time frame, and 2.5 minutes will go yellow, 3 minutes will go red. I think everybody else kind of knows the drill. If you do wish to speak about the upcoming public hearing on the budget, we'll have a separate hearing. So our first person is Mr. Chisholm. Good evening. Yes, have it. Take it with you.
No. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
City Council, Mayor, ladies and gentlemen, greetings. My name is Jay Chisholm. I am the property owner at 1595 Carr Street, Lakewood, Colorado. My quarrel is not with the building department. They do not have any problem with my wall. My quarrel is with the Public Works Department. We recently received this letter from the Public Works Department. It says here that if the wall is not torn down, the city will start enforcement action regarding encroachment into the floodway. This is a blow-up of the North Dry Gulch regulatory map showing the floodway in red.
Jay, pull the mic a little closer, please. You. Yeah.
This is my building. And with the wall that I want to build, notice that it is not in the floodway. This is my neighbor to the west. Notice also the width of the floodway behind my neighbor in the alley. This is another view of this area. Notice the wall behind my neighbor's property. This entire wall is in the floodway. And here's a ground view of the wall. And this step stool is 3 feet high. This wall was built without a permit. The city is going to tear out my wall that is not in the floodway. When 20 feet to the west, my neighbor's wall runs 100 feet across the floodway. Public Works has no problem with my neighbor's wall, yet they are hysterical about my wall that sticks out 2 feet. I want equity with my neighbor. It has been said that they do not want to start a precedent of violation of the ordinance by allowing my wall. However, my neighbor's wall already has set a precedent of violation, and this is not my problem. I request the City Council to inquire of Public Works why they are tearing out my wall. I want equal treatment with my neighbor. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So that exhausts the roster. Anybody else wish to speak in public comment tonight? Seeing none, I will close public comment. I'd say, Mr. Chisholm, we had a great opportunity to sit down and spend some time together and go over different ideas, which I did discuss with our Public Works as well as Economic Development. And unfortunately, we're just not to a point where we can find a way to move forward without some cooperation on your end. And that doesn't mean that the neighbor isn't in violation, and I think that's being addressed as well. So I think we need to continue to try to work and seek an answer. I think everybody up here feels for you. However, when dealing with federal regulations and floodplain, we don't have a lot of leeway. So, I think you have a lot of advocates up here, but we just don't know how to help without removing the violation. Okay. Will the clerk please read item 7 to the record?
Item 7, the first public hearing for ordinance O 2017-13, adopting a revised budget for the year 2017 for the city of Lakewood, Colorado, and further adopting the annual budget for the city for the fiscal year beginning on the first day of January 2018 and ending on December 31st, 2018, estimating the amount of money necessary to be raised by levying taxes for the year 2017 to defray the costs of municipal government of the city of Lakewood, Colorado for the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2018 and ending December 31st, 2018, and estimating the amount of money to be derived from other revenue sources, setting forth the appropriations for each fund.
My apologies. Could you also just continue to read the whole consent? I kind of jumped out of line, didn't I? Oh, no, I didn't. We're
No, this
good.
is the first reading.
We're good. Thank you. Our city treasurer, finance director, Larry Dorr, will have a presentation.
Thank you, Mayor and members of City Council. Once again, Larry Dorr, City of Lakewood Treasurer and Finance Director. I also want to thank Madam Clerk for her reading of that long title of this ordinance. And tonight marks a large occasion, a big event in the annual budget process for the city. And this is a time when the public can have its formal input on what's gone into the budget so far. And this will be the first of 2 public hearings. It's really the only ordinance of the city that requires 2 public hearings, and so this is a big occasion. It's not quite as big as what might be a home Rockies baseball game tonight, doggone it, but we're gonna keep to it and soldier forward. We did meet on September 18th. Whoops. Let me get all the. Oh, beg your pardon. Thank you for your patience. We did meet on September 18th at Council's budget study session, and myself and other members of the leadership team overviewed the many programs and services and capital projects. So I don't have any big new information on the budget at this point in the game, but I do have a few items to keep you interested and just update on a couple of subjects that we've already talked about. But for those watching at home for the first time or here in chambers tonight or watching on a recorded session, this is not the first time that the City Council has met on this budget. Far from it. We've had not only our council study session, but as you see here, a meeting of our Budget and Audit Committee to review all of our estimates and all of our forecasts in the budget. Our Budget and Audit Committee consists of 3 council members. Council members Franks, Coop, and Johnson. We also have 3 citizen members on the committee, Donald Tallman, Tim Dennis, and John Ludwigson. Before all of those events, of course, however, we've had many budget coordinators, many planners, many financial analysts, and myself involved in all of the details of the budget for many months, starting as far back as April, when we first start to understand the revenues of the city and what our forecasts are for different costs and what some of the program needs are for the coming year. But tonight, again, as I say, marks the first of 2 public hearings, and then the next and last step in the budget journey, if you will, is October 30th. There will be another public hearing and a vote for adoption by the City Council. Our city charter requires that the budget be adopted by November 1st, so this allows the greatest amount of time for public input, for financial evaluation, and discussion of the details on not only the part of council, but as a part of the public. So tonight, I'll give just a little bit of overview. I won't cover some of the things that have gone on this year and happened last year in terms of projects and outputs. I'll talk about a couple of events that have really impacted our budget for this year and next year. And also just give a little budgeting background on some of the things that we do as a city and maybe some of the things that we don't do. Talk a little bit about where we get our revenues and which services we provide, so as to give just a little backdrop for the public. You know, in terms of our process, there are really 4 major things that I want to highlight that really go into this. The first being, we need to estimate our income first as a city to really understand what kind of resources we have to work with. Because our income as a city goes up and down based on discretionary purchases and sales tax and things, we need to really understand that forecast. And we've had quite a change to our budget this year as a result of the Colorado Mills being partially closed as of May 8th. and I'll have an update. There was an article earlier today, in fact, with 7 News that talked a little bit about the progress and some of the things that Colorado Mills is hopeful of. Also, unlike a household with a fixed income, the income to the city goes up and down. And I know that many in the community haven't experienced that in their upbringing or in their current home life. So I really want to punctuate that by showing how revenues can go up and down and how we need to be cautious and start with estimating income as opposed to beginning with what do we want to do. But eventually we get around to prioritizing our expenses. And really as a city, what we do 2 things. We provide programs via our personnel. We have a 900 full-time workforce. And we do have some additions to existing programs. I'll talk just a little bit about that. We also have many capital projects in construction underway and planned and proposed in this budget. So I'll kind of break it down into 2 categories. At the end of it all, we do need to save for a rainy day. No coincidence it's raining today, but we had a big event earlier this year that really hit home for our community, whereby it's a good thing that for many years we had the financial responsibility to save for that rainy day and we can weather this storm. We're reducing our budget by $2.7 million in income, yet we're able to continue the regular municipal services that our community relies on, so that that's how this reserve has really played into that, or our rainy day fund. Last but not least, I use the word and the expression fund a lot, and so do you city council members and mayor as you ask questions and talk about the different programs and services that we provide. But that's a little bit of jargon, and you all have the experience and know what that is, but many folks watching at home or in chambers might not. And really a fund is just like perhaps in your household you might have a vacation fund or a holiday spending fund or what have you. At the city we have 16 funds, and really they account for separately all of the activities of the city. Some of them are required as a result of a vote that the people of Lakewood have had. Others are required under various accounting rules, and others just make good business sense for us to segregate costs and incomes. If anybody wants to look at page 96, you'll see what I call here the Sweet 16 that break down into governmental, capital projects, our proprietary funds, and that'll give you a little feel for how we account for the roughly $200 million in programs and spending that make up the city budget. And earlier in this process in September, I went into really good detail for the mayor and council in terms of all of the different funds and what are their purposes. But if anybody would like to have a look at that online, you can do that, or walk yourself through the budget document. I should have pointed out that this 540 pages of council's had since September 8th, and a good long time to get into the details of this, but it's always available online, of course. And in keeping with our core value of community sustainability, we won't be printing another version of this. We're going to keep it digital. But this is a good work paper for all of council, and we'll have one final hard copy in the clerk's office for our archives. I mentioned income, and that's where it all starts. And when you look at the activities of the city, nearly 2/3 of everything is happening in our general fund, and that's because the city's general fund can provide any lawful municipal service. It's twice as large as everything else put together. The next largest slice, which is about 14% of the restricted funds, is our capital improvement fund, and I have a good number of slides on that, and makes up quite a large chunk. But the rest of my comments will be about the general fund as we proceed, and that's because it makes up the lion's share of the income, and also, quite honestly, has the greatest amount of volatility. Then within the general fund, I talk about this a lot, but 2/3 of the income is made up of sales tax. Sales and use tax is a tax levied on the exchange of tangible personal property. So if you buy a necktie or a pair of shoes or personal property in the community, the city's 3% sales tax is applied to that. Now, what we've found is that generally purchases are discretionary in nature. Many purchases can be delayed indefinitely, or many days or months. Others you might make more regularly, but with that discretion comes the volatility. And a lot of it's based on consumer income and consumer confidence. So it's something that we take a look at. Our second largest source of income charges for services, these are all related to our recreation activities, court activities, and others, franchise fees, property tax, and intergovernmental revenue. I always point out that I've got other up here, and the largest percent in there would make up, the largest amount would make up 3%, and that's licenses and permits. But much smaller are things like tobacco tax, interest income, and things like this. If Colorado Mills had its own slice up here, it would be 6.4%. When you take all of the general fund sales and use tax developed by the Colorado Mills, it makes up a very large percentage of the city's income. Obviously, just a huge workforce out there as well, and just many, many activities happening at the mills. Oftentimes, people think or feel that all of the sales tax that's paid comes to the city, but the state government income is also significantly dependent on sales tax. And as you see here, the state's sales tax rate is 2.9%. The Regional Transportation District and Scientific and Cultural Facilities District, 1.1%, and then Jefferson County open space sales tax, all of that combines to a 7.5% sales tax, which, if you compare that all-in rate to other states in the country that have a sales tax, this is a pretty low rate overall, and makes the Colorado economy very competitive. Little known, however, is many folks feel that their property tax that is paid, because it's always a big number in the household. And just to give you an idea, a $300,000 property tax, a $300,000 home in the Lakewood community would have about a $2,000 property tax bill. And people see that it's a big number, it's four figures, and even if it's paid through mortgage withholdings and so forth, it's still a big number, and people are aware of it. But more than half goes to the school district, and then you can see the breakdown from there over to the county and fire districts. So quite a large percentage of that, well, nearly all of it goes elsewhere, but a small balance to the city. So I just want to sort of talk about the sources of income and the fund that I'm referring to as we move ahead. So that lays a little bit of a foundation, but how do we go about estimating this income? What do we do? We don't have any full-time economists. The state, they have those, and they're very in tune with what's happening across the metro area, the Front Range, and of course the entire state. So we look at what's happening both in the Governor's Office of State Planning and Budgeting, and we also look at the economic forecast of the Colorado Legislative Council. They do have full-time economists, teams of people, honestly, with PhDs, and they study all sectors of the economy, including retail and personal income and so forth. So we have a look at what they're forecasting for sales tax. Now, the state is forecasting population growth far greater than what we're anticipating in Lakewood, and that's kind of what's driving the numbers here. And you see what, first, these good people are forecasting versus what the budget office at the city of Lakewood might see in terms of sales tax growth. By the way, we've adjusted these numbers for the idea that the Colorado Mills Mall is partially closed, and it will reopen later in November this year. So we've made an adjustment for that. But also, we come and go from the community, and we have a look at what's going on around the Lakewood economy. This is a project here at Lakewood City Commons that's now reopened. This is the King Soopers location, and it's been quite a change to the store, and will drive our economy, will drive our sales tax. But of course, when the old business closed down and left the community, obviously that was a decrease in sales tax. So we try to account for all of those changes that are meaningful. And speaking of which, let me add on another one. At Council's study session on September 18th, I talked quite a bit about the change that's happening in the retail economy and change that's happening in the retail experience. I took this photograph on I-70, and it seemed unimaginable to me 10 years ago in this profession that the Amazon company would not only be opening up offices and warehouses, but they would be delivering with their own trucks in our community. And that was just fascinating to me, and I'm continuing to study the company and how it's impacting our income as a city and as a community. This was the one little bit of news that I thought I would share with you. I talked about how people are ordering online, and that's really impacting things. After the study session, we all went home, and the Toys R Us Corporation declared bankruptcy. that particular night. And so tonight I'm not going to talk about any other companies or what they sell or what that may look like, because I think I may be bad luck to those people. But you should know this is where it comes home to us now, is the city of Lakewood has a Babies R Us store. And that's a part of the company. And I can tell you it generates a meaningful amount of sales tax. And then also keep in mind those workers at that location, many of them will live in our community. And of course, they're going to work with a much different concern than we would have all had, that morning. So this is real. I think I said it that way in our September 18th meeting. And I think it will continue. I think it will continue as the retail experience changes. And I'll also guide you to a follow-up article that was published by the Harvard Business Review on this subject. And I found it very interesting in terms of what people are experiencing and what their expectations are in retail. So we drive around our community, we see construction, we see delivery trucks, and we see investment in our community because it is safe and has a high quality of life. And you see this major student center installment here at Colorado Christian University. And I could give many other examples. I typically do, but I won't tonight. I just want to transition into the event of May 8th, 2017, and that was a very large hailstorm that swept across our whole community. I think we instantly knew about Colorado Mills, its closure, and how that impacted over 1,000 workers. Of course, the city joined others in a job fair that happened so that we could help those in the community who were impacted look for other work. I don't think we quite understood the impact to residences and other businesses outside of that geography, quite honestly, and now we're seeing quite an activity in roofing permits and so forth that are just quite striking to see all of the damages that have gone on. And also, we're seeing what's happening with motor vehicle sales. Many Lakewood residents have had to entirely replace their vehicles, and you see a shot here of that happening. So to recap a few things, one of the concerns that we should be aware of, that we don't have to worry about related to this, is that the Colorado Mills Mall and its revenue is exempt from Tabor. Otherwise, the city's new revenue base would be a lower number, and it couldn't go back up. So this impact will be for just this one period, however long that may be and however much it might be. So that's a little bit of a relief. The voters elected to exempt that geography back in 1996. But just to give you the magnitude, last year, the sales tax revenue generated from Colorado Mills, $7,120,000. That is very, very large. And you see the percentages of both sales taxes within the general fund and then revenues in the general fund. Now, some retailers did not close. They remained open. I think there were about a dozen, and they tended to be outside of the largest building, which many people think of as the mall, but they were the buildings that weren't connected to the main building, and they are open. And I mentioned that the current estimated reopening date is Black Friday, November 24th, but now there are maybe some indications that some could open earlier. The Yard House restaurant opened just about a month ago, I think, right in that range. And so others will open as they're able to do so. And then others, according to the article, may not open until 2018. Some of the smaller retailers inside that are still experiencing some reconstruction and so forth. But take a look at that for yourself. So we have budgeted a decrease of $2,700,000 to our general fund, which will come out of our rainy day fund and come out of our reserves so that we can just go ahead and continue to maintain services, which really hits home to fiscal responsibility. We want to make sure that we've got reserves on hand to continue to provide calls for service and continue on with our capital construction as we are. So now that we have an idea of what the city has available to spend, now we can look at all of the expenses and what the programs might be, and what enhancements or changes might be necessary or whatnot as we move through. So as a services organization, we don't have any recipes. We don't have any patents. We don't have any finished goods or inventory, those kinds of things. We just have our people, our workforce, that provides services within the community. Now, that workforce, we do spend money on services and supplies, but that's primarily to equip the workforce. Police cars, gasoline, electricity, all of the things that are necessary to run offices, things like that. So that gives you a little bit of background of what's happening, and I'll overview in our three largest departments, our main lines of business, our police, public works, and community resources departments, some of the things that will be happening in this proposed 2018 budget here in a moment. But what about that rainy day fund? What's it look like? And you see here that over the last decade or more, that the city has continued to be very fiscally responsible and continued to add to its reserve. Now, at the direction of the council, this past year, reserves were used in 2016, and they will be in 2017. This year, we're using reserves to do some significant and generational type capital projects, like the reconstruction of Lasley Park. We also did some park acquisition there. We're improving park paths and trails. We're also doing our first and second phases of our public safety center building, both indoors and outdoors. We're improving some environments in there for both our police department and our information technology department. We're also funding the replacement of our amphitheater out at Belmar Park, and we're funding new mobile data computers for our police squad cars. But this is a reserve that's, I think, is not too big, not too small, but just right. It allows the city to have some security in looking at these major events and even emergencies, but not too big that we can't do some capital construction and some major projects for the community. So with that, I'll just touch on a high level, not all of the details, of some of the proposed new items in our police department. And I do have our police chief, Dan McCaskey, behind me in the audience, and he can come answer any questions that may come up related to this. And I'll just talk again about the big matters. And I think the first one is that we'll be adding to our police force overall size again for the third consecutive year. And we'll be focusing on the police department's sector liaison unit, adding 4 agents and 1 sergeant. I'll talk a little bit about what they do in a moment. We'll also be funding a remodel to that space, because we're now going to have that team at 10 personnel, and we'll be able to do that right away from our existing force. And then also, we're adding funding for Jefferson County Regional Crime Lab and DNA activities that are happening there. So our sector liaison team is going to increase from 5 to 9 agents, and they'll have their own supervisor as a sergeant in the role. And really what this team will be focusing on are the matters of homelessness, mental health, and sex offender registration. We'll be able to increase our responsiveness and coverage in those particular areas. So we will be adding to that and growing in that area. I did not mention that, I don't have up here, but I'll mention real briefly that we are upgrading some technology as well in the police department, and it's both hardware and software. And because of the growth in the police force over the last couple of years, plus this new addition, we are adding some squad cars to the fleet. And I don't mean to replace some of the old squad cars. I mean, we're increasing our base of police cars so that we have a greater availability for our police agents. It's something that we will continue to monitor in the coming year, what the impact of those additional cars are. So we're pleased to see those changes coming, both office spaces, hardware, software, vehicles, and personnel in our police department. And I mentioned earlier we're doing some work over on the building and facility as well. So that's just some really great progress happening there. And before I jump into public works, I want to talk about one matter that I did not cover at our study session. And so much has happened in the country in the last couple of months related to emergencies, and I don't have to tell you about those because we're all very keenly aware of them. But I thought it would be a good idea to talk with Mayor and Council and the public who might be watching about the Lakewood Office of Emergency Management and our emergency manager. You know, we have a lot going on in that area, and you should wonder what that is and how that's working. But our emergency manager, Mr. Jesse Miller, he reports to our Support Services Division Chief, and this is a substantial section and program within our police department. And those responsibilities include emergency plans and procedures, supervision of the Lakewood Police Hazardous Materials Team, coordinating with all state, local, and federal agencies, responsibility for coverage of any federal grant awards, management and maintenance of our Emergency Operations Center, which is a very unique and significant facility here at City Hall. Also responsible for the training and coordination of all the Emergency Operations Center staff, so quite a role there. And then also responsible for the city's continuing operations plan and our emergency operations plan. So a couple of things that we have in place. It's anticipated that this work and these programs will help the city mitigate natural disasters, influenzas that could occur, facilitate emergency sheltering in the Lakewood community, manage severe winter storms, manage flooding, damage assessments, debris management, and extended power outages that may occur in the community and in the region. So I felt that it would be a good idea to just touch on that just a little bit, and of course Chief McCaskey could continue to elaborate. But this is a role that has evolved, quite honestly, with the growth of Lakewood. At one time or another, this role was primarily focused on hazardous material events and other things, and was based out of our Public Works Department. We still have that role in our Public Works Department, but we've asked our emergency manager to really focus on this higher level and the more, eventful emergencies that could impact a greater number of people. So thank you for indulging me an extra couple of minutes there to really talk about emergency management and that program. There aren't any proposed changes or additions or new initiatives necessary, but I just felt with all the things kind of happening that might be a good idea. So with that, let me transition to our Public Works Department, which is a very large business for the city, obviously. We have a multi-million-dollar street resurfacing program. We release the details of that a little bit later in the year as the planning evolves and then the evaluation of events goes on. But one of our very fundamental things is to fund the installation of sidewalks, and of course we do rehabilitate sidewalks. But this gives you a little bit of an idea of some of the facilities that do exist and do not exist in Lakewood. And our Public Works Director, Jay Hutchison, went over all of the details of this in the council's meeting on September 18th. But I just want to highlight this just a touch, and then we have this going on in a couple of different locations in the city that will help our multi-use access to many facilities across the community gain improvement. In addition, we have signal upgrades. We have really a signal replacement and management program that's $975,000 a year in funding. You can see that this is 20th and Teller, and provides really not only a modernization, which you see in the upper right, but a replacement of last generation facilities in terms of these aluminum poles and so forth. So this is happening at that intersection. And then this intersection, we do a lot, and I have to really give kudos to our Public Works Department for all of the matching grants. This is a $750,000 project along Kipling at the Fed Center, but $700,000 in federal funds. So exciting projects coming to modernize the city's traffic and signal facilities. And then I've got just one more here, the Kipling turn lanes at Hampton. You can see here, and Mr. Hutchison overviewed this on September 18th. You can go back and take a look at that, where obviously we have some vehicles stacking up here in the queue, and it's time to make some changes and progress down at this intersection. Last but not least, we do have a stormwater management utility, and we do have some meaningful projects coming here, as you see in the Applewood area. We're getting some plans together. These projects tend to take multi-years to plan, organize, and design. And then, of course, Independence Street at 8th Avenue. And, of course, if there are any detailed questions that we need to go back on, we can cover those for you tonight. Last but certainly not least is our Community Resources Department, and I think these three departments that I'm covering are obviously the most visible across the community, so I really just wanted to touch on that. What's happening with the Lakewood Possibilities Fund. Our Director of Community Resources, Kit Newland, gave a really, not only an overview, but a really good detailed picture of what's happened with our Lakewood Possibilities Fund, but essentially this lets younger people in the community get access to programs, access to recreation centers, youth sports, whatever the case may be, through scholarships, just to kind of cut right through it. And you'll see what's happened in the last couple of years. This budget will make one of the largest leaps forward in terms of funding and give more access to more people to additional programs. So we're adding some horsepower to that. And then let me just talk about some capital projects. We have phase one of our public safety center improvements happening across the way, and you may have seen our footbridge was closed for a little while. It's reopened, and then we're doing some temporary work there as well. But this is really to make the building safer for pedestrians, and this second phase will also add some ADA and parking and access to the facility as well. So phase two coming to the Public Safety Center, which is home to our municipal courts, information technology, and our police department. We have proposed in this budget a $600,000 replacement, not renovation, but replacement to the Glennon Heights pool, showers and locker rooms. This will be completely removed and rebuilt to the tune of $600,000. This facility dates to the 1960s, and it's time for replacement. It will also allow greater access for those with disabilities. So excited about that. And you notice in the left-hand picture there's a pool for youngsters, and that's going to be replaced as well with a more modern feature that kids are used to seeing, splash type facilities. So that will happen. Under community sustainability, we will be advancing in this 2018 budget our waste and recycling system in parks, and we'll be installing these big belly facilities, and these take both trash and recyclables, and they're smart, as they call them, meaning that what's put in there is compacted, and it's less of an impact for people, decreasing the cost. And I mean staff to go out and empty the facilities, right? Because it compacts, and then it sends a message saying something, but I think it's probably like, I'm full, come and empty this, and something like that, so that we know to get out there and empty this, and just making sure you're still paying attention there. But in addition, we want to advance. It was it's a tough act to follow, the retirement that was announced earlier, and we want to continue to, when possible and when the need is there, advance services via Lakewood Rides, and we're doing that both in a vehicle and in personnel. So that's proposed in our 2018 budget as well, and I think Mayor and Council, you all know the demand and also the appreciation for Lakewood Rides. Our Washington Heights Art Center, it dates to the 1800s and is one of the earliest buildings in the region, and it is a historic building, and it needs some, quite honestly, a little more than a little TLC, but I think that the community can be very proud in its Washington Heights Art Center. But what we need to do is get into the foundation and into the roof, and we need to look at the mechanicals. It probably won't necessarily look or feel any different, but this project is on the order of $500,000 to just really get it up to snuff in terms of foundation and some of the mechanicals, and that, I think that's quite visible here in the photographs. Now, let me also tell you one very large project that I did not include in this presentation related to community sustainability that's happening in community resources. Now, I've overviewed this for council on September 18th, but I had to cut the slides down just a touch, and that's related to energy performance contracting. And the city would be undertaking about a $2.5 million project to upgrade lighting, upgrade ventilation systems, update boilers and all kinds of different energy management things across the various facilities at the city. And that now is a good time to remind Mayor and Council that we will have 3 activities, 3 agenda items on October 30th in addition to the budget, and that's related to, one of them is related to this energy performance contract that will facilitate the lease purchase of the various equipment. The city has had success in doing this in the past. This isn't our first time out doing these energy performance contracts, so we've got some good experience, and it'll not only decrease consumption and decrease emissions and save money over time, but also we think the environments in the buildings could be a little more comfortable for our visitors and workers as well. So it's really a nice home run. So with that, I just have one follow-up item to provide, and that's related to a 4th of July event. And when I was here in September, for our budget study session, my colleague, Kit Newland, Community Resources Director, provided some numbers related to a 4th of July event. And we just want to provide a little bit more detail to that. I'm not used to working with numbers quite this size, but I'm going to throw myself into it, quite honestly, and talk a little bit about the revenues that could come. Now, let me first back up just a little bit and say that I've divided these into 2 concepts, and the first is a full-day event. And a full-day event would start at noon and conclude somewhere around 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. And so first, in each of them, I'm going to cover the revenues that would be anticipated and then the related expenses. And then I'll be turning it over to you, Mayor and council members, for questions, comments, whatever the case may be. So first, this full day event would have more features. It would be longer. We would need to have a reason for people to come and maybe leave and then come back, or come for part of the activity, or just hang out for the whole thing. And so that needs to be dynamic, and it needs to have the right feel to it. But first, let me say there would be no admission. So you got to get that right out there. And then this would be what we think would be the revenues for a full day activity. And I gave you a few moments there to kind of read it over, but obviously food vendor booths would be present. And of course, those vendors, those food vendors would pay in $250, and we think we can accommodate 15 booths. Non-food vendors, and I think we probably all saw these at Cider Days this past weekend, so you can get a real flavor for, the credit union is there, and the coffee house is there, and you kind of get a little feel for what's happening. We think we'd accommodate 30 of those. And then also sponsorships. You might have seen, I happened to be over at Cider Days yesterday, and you might have seen one sponsor was a company called Honest Tea. And you could sample their tea, and you could get a coupon, and things like that. They also paid a sponsorship in order to have a little bit of a larger booth, and then also they got a number of other benefits for being a sponsor. They got links on the websites, and their company logo was a part of some of the promotions, right? I mean, I think you all probably get sponsorships. I'm belaboring that a little bit. Also Automotive Avenues and some other great businesses were sponsors. So there's the revenue. And then the expenses for a full day event, we need things for people to do, just like you go watch your tractor pull over at Cider Days. You got to have stuff to do, right? And so here are the details of that. And forgive me, this font started getting smaller and smaller and smaller, but I think I've got the right detail in there. And first, let me just talk a little bit about fireworks displays. And as I was talking to people about this, I got a great education on fireworks displays, let me tell you. I feel really good about that. And, we've all been to them before, and you know that some are a lot more exciting than others, right? And we all know our favorite part is the finale, right, where they're going crazy. Well, the finale costs more, per minute than the first shot. And so if you would just kind of keep that in mind, let me just walk through it. So let me just say that these are the numbers that were presented at the earlier meeting, $144,000 worth of expenses, and here's how it breaks out. So on one end of the spectrum, you have the firework where one goes off, and there's a little pause, and then another one goes off, and that can range down to about $1,000 a minute, okay? And then you go to the other end of the spectrum, which is not just multiple fireworks happening at the same time, one or two or three, but also they look different. They make different sounds and different colors and different shapes and do all that. Those are way more money, obviously. And so we kind of, I think, went toward the middle, and we've also talked to people like Estes Park. We've talked to Adams County and some other people, and we've seen their shows, and we think that $2,000 a minute really is the right firework display. That gets people excited and feeling like they saw a great show. They want to go back and see again. Also, people are really into like this choreographed music. This is the most fun I got to tell you I've had on budget stuff in a good while getting into this. So then they have the music. It's kind of like the Christmas lights that are timed that you see on people's homes. Okay, next, obviously, there would be a band or a DJ or entertainment for kids. There would need to be a stage if there were a band. One of the biggest expenses related to police traffic management. Obviously, we have to have, the health department will require portalets. You've got to estimate your attendance. You've got to have those. I think these are mostly self-explanatory for y'all. And then miscellaneous supplies. And then we would need an event coordinator, because this would be a significant amount of work and require some additional capacity. So there you go. The next option or concept, I suppose, is an evening event. And the evening event, obviously it would be shorter, so the vendors they're not willing to pay as much, and we don't need as many and all of that. And then there wouldn't be necessarily as many sponsorships. I think that's self-explanatory. The fireworks display in this instance would be more like $1,500 a minute, more modest. A little more modest. It wouldn't have the music and all those kinds of things. Police traffic management, we think that's going to be the same, because you just got to get people in and out in the crush of what is, the fireworks display. Portalets, fewer portalets, obviously. You see here the fire permit. I didn't mention that earlier. On-site fire marshal and EMTs. I should have mentioned on the earlier one, security and staff. A lot of this has to do with things that are set up overnight. You got to have staff you're not going to have a police agent waving someone to a parking stall, right? You're not going to do that. You're going to have some other staff. And then there need to be people you can ask questions like, where are those portalets or whatever? And so we need to have some people there to do that. And then, some miscellaneous supplies. So I think that is a 4th of July event for an evening. And I should have mentioned this would begin at 4 p.m. And go till, that 9:30 or 10 o'clock type hour. So hopefully that's enough detail. I don't know what more detail I might even be able to provide, but I do have a couple of colleagues here in the audience who could help. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and close it up, and then we can hear from the public, Mr. Mayor, and we'll go from there. I always like to point out the compliance of the budget. That's my job, is to make sure that we're in compliance with these elements. And the last one, and of course this has to do with Tabor reserves and balanced budget and the city manager's deadline and some other things that are in the charter. But the last one is adopt the budget by November 1st. And I think we've done and gotten everything done that we need really to do that. And so with that, I just want to first point out that the city, for its 2017 budget a year ago, got its 18th straight Distinguished Budget Presentation Award, and we can all be proud of that, because what it means is that we're committed to a thorough, a transparent, and a very visible budget process that just has a lot of detail. And we'll be submitting this 2018 budget for this award too. And it's really an appreciation to all of the folks that contributed to it. Our leadership team, our various budget coordinators, our budget accountant, Carrie Murphy, and of course, Mayor and City Council, for your contributions to this. And through it all, we always keep in mind our core community values. Everything we do needs to connect to these policies and these values in order for us to make sure that this document meets the needs of the public and will win these awards. So, with that, the next time you'll see me is October 30th for public hearing and adoption. And Mayor, I think I'll step aside and welcome the public.
Thank you, Mr. Dorr. And again, just to remind folks that this is our only item that we actually have 2 public hearings on. So I will now open the public hearing. Nobody's signed the roster to speak. Anybody in chambers wish to speak? Seeing none, I will close that roster. And we will go into questions. I want to start with questions, and then we can circle back to comments. And if there are any kinds of motions, we can certainly do that tonight, but we could also do it on the 30th. And I would ask you to please write your motions down on the sheets provided so that we know exactly what is being proposed. And with that, I will start with Miss Vincent.
I just have one real quick question. The failure to put in, let's see, I think it was a marijuana tax and special districts that they're now, that they're now going back to address. Is that going to have any impact on us? Because we get revenues from
Thank you,
SFCD.
Councilmember Vincent. This short answer is no, but also for context for others, maybe I could just add a little bit to that. Yes, the state legislature was doing some work around tax exemptions of the state sales tax and made some changes that impacted revenues to a few special districts, RTD and SCFD, and I mentioned what those were earlier. And the governor and others are working on this or were working on this at the state legislature, just as context, but none of that will have any impact on the city. As a home rule city, the city of Lakewood determines what its tax base is at all times, and so none of that will be impacted.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Councilor Franks.
Just a couple of items, and they may not be questions that are applicable but to this year's budget, but I kind of want to maybe get prepared for possibly even next year's. One, on the 4th of July, I wanted to understand if any of those service fees included in there addressed any kind of like a pet safety kind of working with Foothills Animal Shelter. Some people have reached out to me and said that if we reinstitute a 4th of July fireworks celebration, they're concerned about maybe the animal welfare, and did that include maybe any kind of outreach, communication, pet safety, how do you keep them safe during those periods? And I didn't see that listed and didn't know if that's possibly inconsequential from a costing standpoint, but whether that would be included.
Councilor Franks, thank you. No, that wasn't included in the list of what the event itself might cost, but we work closely with the Foothills Animal Shelter and do a lot of messaging. That would be something that we would really focus on in advance of the 4th of July event. Because we do hear a lot about pets and what those impacts are during this holiday. And frankly, whether we have a specific event or if it's just people's fireworks.
Right. And the other one was, and I know it's a very small portion of our revenues that comes in for the permitting and the licensing. But as I'd mentioned a couple meetings ago, I do believe that, one of our key responsibilities is the health, safety, and welfare of our citizens. And I would like to maybe work through the process to understand what our limitations are on enforcement for people who don't pull permits for very large projects that involve things like electrical, plumbing, structural changes, to see if maybe we need to look at some way where we can identify an enforcement program that's going to make sure that when people buy homes here in Lakewood that have had significant remodels, that they're buying a home that's safe.
Thank you for that question. That is something that we can talk about in a study session and maybe do some education in terms of what those requirements are and talk about what some potential
solutions might be as it relates to people who don't pull permits and what those consequences are. That wouldn't be a part of the budget conversation, but I'll make note of it.
So, and I would put that, so I'll put that, one of those sheets in for that, but also would like to understand the budget impacts, if that would be additional staffing. So that could be a 2019, if there were avenues forward that required additional staffing.
That's right.
That we could factor those in, but that's more for later. I just wanted to throw that out.
Thank you for filling out that form. That's great. And we can also, we'll look at what those the fiscal impacts might be, and that might be a 2018 revised budget addition. So we'll look at that after we have the study. So thank you for bringing that up.
Councilor Johnson.
Thank you. I just have a few questions in here. Let me see here. On page 73, under budget overview, in the middle there, it's got the heritage, culture, and arts, and a one-time item there for, it looks like $3,451,000. Could you please just explain it? I know there's a good explanation for it, but.
Sure. Yes, this is a revenue page, first of all, and we have a special revenues fund for our heritage, culture, and the arts activities, and these are the revenues by type by that fund. So those heritage, culture, and the arts, they have ticket revenues, they collect revenue from scientific cultural facilities.
I was thinking something else when I asked that.
Okay.
Sorry, I could have figured that out. Some of these I can ask you offline too. Sorry. Oh, okay. On page 193, under City Attorney's Office, it's talking about traffic tickets. And in 2014, there were close to 14,000. 2015, 14. 2016, 8,800, a little more. And then 2017, an estimate of 7,500. That's quite a difference. I mean,
Yeah.
somebody please just talk what's going on,
Sure.
what the trend is, why that trend is there.
Sure. Let me try to talk about it at a bit of a high level, and then others may add more details, quite honestly. So, first of all, the city attorney's office is also responsible for municipal prosecution. So if you commit a crime in Lakewood or any violation, the city attorney's office is responsible for prosecuting that, and that includes a speeding ticket or reckless driving, whatever the case may be. So hence, that's why this data is reported here, number one. But number two, I think we've heard from Chief McCaskey about his challenges staffing and getting recruits. We've just had our first police academy where we did not have enough candidates to fill all of the vacancies. And I think we've got the most police recruits in our police academy at the moment than we've ever had. Well, when that happens, it decreases our ability to, quite honestly, to have traffic tickets brought into our city attorney's office and into our municipal courts. So that's the one thing that's decreased a little bit. I'd like to say everybody slowed down in the community, but not necessarily. It's just really that enforcement, Councilor Johnson. Yep.
Yeah, because that's almost half, really.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's a substantial trend. That's
Yeah.
why it caught my attention.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
Okay, and then under the police, again, on page 331, the office of the chief of police was 3,700,000, and it's fluctuated quite a bit. Is that because of staffing as well?
Yes. So we anticipate that we'll be doing a lot of hiring. I can't think right off the top of my head the numbers that we're planning in our police academies for 2018, but they're large. And what we've done is every year is budgeted the new recruits into the office of the chief of police, where he has his professional standards section and where we budget for all the equipment for the new agents and so forth. And then once they've reached their level of training, they will then transition into, quite honestly, the various divisions that the chief has that are necessary, typically patrol, but then some of those patrol agents can go and do investigations or support services, whatever the case may be. And then, of course, once those are filled, we can do more traffic enforcement, quite honestly, and that'll change what's going on with the traffic tickets. But yes, that's all, those are the recruits.
Okay, because 2016, you've got 3,773,000. And then in 2018, it goes up to 8 million. That's a substantial jump. That's always what gets my attention, is when something is trending and going very high. And so you anticipate that 4 million actually is for the recruits?
To give you an idea of this, I think let me back up and say that the chief and the finance director, myself, and our human resources director, Jeff Dolan of Employee Relations, we meet every quarter and look at the staffing of the police department so that we can have a look at the finances and what our recruiting is and so forth. And we, as I mentioned, we have some 30-some officers in our police academies, but on the streets we have less than our authorized strength. So that's this. I'd like to say that 2016 was not our base. We were well under budget by quite a lot, more than $1 million under budget.
Larry, I just want to say publicly, I absolutely support more police agents. We're a growing city and we've got growing needs and we need them. So that's not the issue. I'm just trying to make sure that it's it makes sense here to me, budget-wise or numbers-wise. On page 334, it's still under the police, and about the middle of the page it has custodian, 0.39 for 16, and then we're not budgeting that anymore. And the only reason that comes to my attention is that one of the substations over off of Colfax North, there was an issue a few years ago that really it needed some attention. And I'm hopeful that we are not going to go back to the situation that we were having a few years ago, because those, they need to be taken care of. Talk to me, what's going on that we're not going to have a custodian?
Yeah, thank you. I know that over the years that the philosophy and approach and the regulations have also changed about having an on-staff custodian in the police building. And frankly, that also houses our municipal court and information technology. Those are very sensitive businesses. And I think we've gone full circle. We used to have this, first outsourced, where we had a janitorial firm performing those duties, and then it made more sense for security and due to regulations to have that in-house. And then we realized that in our police department, we have custodians and people who do work like that in our building maintenance division, in our community resources department. So I think we're going full circle and back to that business management.
Substation will still be tended to, is what I'm trying to get to.
I believe so, but I should probably check with others that know where that facility is. Or Ms. Hodson,
Yeah,
do you
I
know
can
that?
help with that. Councilor Johnson, that it absolutely still will be attended to. And since you brought that to our attention, there have been some improvements. But if you look at page 208 under community resources, and then you can see where the custodian the amount was transferred from the police department over to community resources department in
Perfect. Just so it doesn't get neglected. That was my concern.
And that's demonstrated in page 208.
Perfect. That's what I want to hear.
Thank you.
Okay, my next question is on page 367, and it's under Public Works. And the administration numbers caught my attention again. 2016, they're 443,000. And then by 2018, we've gone up to 1.548 million. That's a substantial jump in 2 years. Please talk to me. I know there's a good reason for it. I just need to know what it is.
There's a good reason for it. Yes. Our Public Works Department does some very large and substantial capital projects each year. And we've learned over the years that we want to continue to keep these projects moving forward. And we've budgeted contingency money there for capital construction activities only. The last time that these were needed was when the city was doing this project. I can't remember the name of the underpass right here at Wadsworth and effectively at Belmar Park, where sometimes capital construction there are unforeseen complexities. We had just had some flooding down there that needed to be mitigated, and rather than stop the project, if you look at page 373, you'll see that under capital outlay, we have $1 million in contingency. And we do describe this earlier on in the budget. Our Budget and Audit Committee last decade wrote up the policy on this. I believe that's when it occurred. And the main reason is so that when we have some unforeseen event happen with a capital project, the Public Works Department has the authority to proceed and not let the project languish, which could cost more money while it comes to have an appropriation and so forth. So capital project contingencies are very common, and this is a reasonable amount in terms of what happens. But as you can see, in 2016, the spending was zero there on 373. So none of those capital contingencies were needed. And it's been several years, but boy, we really want to make sure that that contingency is there. If all of a sudden there's something happening with construction, we don't have to slow down.
I think what was confusing to me is capital construction rings a different bell for me than administration. And that's where it didn't make sense to me. But you're saying under administration is the capital construction.
Well, the capital construction contingency is in administration, so only Mr. Hutchison would have the authority to, add some amount of money that was necessary to continue a process or a project moving forward. And I'll take a look earlier on here in the budget. We do, in the overview, have a description of what's going on with that capital project contingency. And if we catch a moment here, I'll try to highlight that. But this is really something that we learned. We don't want to slow down a project that's, kind of midway.
Oh, that makes sense. I think that's all for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Wickman.
I'm remembering last year at this time, we expressed our collective concern about protecting the environment, sustainability, et cetera, et cetera. A couple of the ideas that were brought forth was, one of them was the trash machine at the parks, and I see that was in your presentation, so very good, thank you. Second thing I remember us discussing, but I don't remember hearing tonight, was we wanted to encourage recycling without doing any sort of coercive mandatory program on the citizens. We were looking for incentives. So one of the ideas was thrown out was to have a second recycling center. Did I miss that tonight? Have we made any progress on that this year?
Thank you. I know that, the answer is no. There aren't any initiatives beyond what I've already described, both the in the park recycling receptacles and then also the energy performance contracting. I think also we have this process underway for the city's Slash facility, but Ms. Hodson, I don't know any examples or any discussion of a second facility for the community.
No, we haven't gotten direction to look at a second recycling site. However, we are still pursuing a Slash site, which is a little different. And we have not secured a site yet for that.
Okay, well, for what it's worth, my final parting shot was, please bring us another recycling center.
And I would add, you know, as we look to next year, and Counselor Wickman, you won't be here, but you could come and lobby for that. That's certainly something that, no, you can wear your hat too. But that's certainly something that council can take up during the planning session. Mayor Pro Tem Harrison.
Thank you. Excellent as usual, Mr. Dorr. I have this may be a question for the chief, but I'm going to ask first. When we are investing in new agents for the PD, can you give me kind of a round number of, by the time we train them, get a new squad car, getting all the equipment that they need, how much have we invested in a new agent?
Thank you. You know, I'm just going to say $100,000 by the time it's all done, because it's a round figure. We don't have one squad car for each agent,
Correct.
Of course, but when you add up field training time, the police academy time, the shooting range, driving range time, that's the automobile driving. When you add up all of those things, my rule of thumb of what we do in the budget office is about $100,000. Yeah, and I left out our colleagues in employee relations. I mean, all of the recruiting and the background screening and the psychological evaluations is just, it's quite significant. Yeah.
And the period of time from start to finish is about?
I know that's 13
18
months, about 13.
13 months.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Thank you.
Counselor Abel.
Couple of things, Mr. Dorr. You mentioned the Colorado Mills problem and the lesser income from that, but we also will see a rise in the building materials use tax, the general use tax, and as you showed, auto sales tax. Will those help offset, or will the Tabor applicability of those other taxes limit its offset on the mills loss?
Thank you. I had a rather complicated PowerPoint slide on that last time in September, and let me just answer quickly. To some small degree, yes. First, the Colorado Mills itself, when the company got a permit and paid construction use tax to fix its own roof, those revenues were exempt from Tabor, and we factored that in. When a residence or a business elsewhere in the Lakewood community, and there were many more than the budget office quite honestly anticipated, but when they come in and pay a permit fee, all of that revenue will be refunded via Tabor for a roofing permit. And 2/3 of the construction use tax will also be refunded. So that's the lion's share of it. And then also on the vehicles, 2/3 of the vehicle use tax will be refunded as well. So it's a mix.
We'll have some relief, but there's a lot of building materials going into rebuilding mills. I would expect that to be more than a little bit. That's a 3% tax, is it?
It is, yeah.
And do you have any idea how many dollars they're spending on materials out at the mall?
Sure do. You know, it's somewhere onward of a $20 million construction project. Half of that, now we don't tax the labor, of course, right? So if you estimate half of that to be materials, that's about $10 million in materials, or about $300,000. So yes, that will offset, that 2.7 million.
You're right about the little bit there.
Yeah.
And then the other, my favorite subject, is the fireworks show. I talked to some of our fireworks providers and talked with folks over at Tri-State. I believe some of our community resources talked with them today as well. They tell me that the best show in the Denver area cost about $30,000 for 4th of July, and that they get somewhat of a break for a 5-year contract, but 40,000 for the evening show would be a real bang-up job. He also said that the 2,000 per minute includes the choreographing. So it doesn't have to be the $3,000 bit. I guess we both had the same education today in fireworks. Also, the venue. It's venue dependent cost would be, because a 20-minute show at Addenbrook Park, which they have done the lines on, they know what they can shoot there. You can use bigger shells. Bigger shells, the same number of bigger shells per minute costs more than they would over at Jeffco Stadium. I believe he said there's a 4-inch maximum for shells. So just by reducing the maximum size of shells, you reduce the cost significantly, he says. So that would be something, another cost factor there. But I'm glad you have looked at it so closely. It's a really interesting thing. And most of the costs, fireworks anytime but 4th of July are cheaper. I think there's something like a 25% premium with 4th of July costs. So, but anyway, so all that thrown together sounds a lot better than the picture we got a couple of weeks ago. Or a little more thorough presentation, perhaps. Thank you.
Councilor Roybal. Council President Roybal, sorry.
Larry, thank you. That was a great presentation. Councilor Abel was dancing around a question that I was thinking about, the income coming in. And you had talked about Colorado Mills. I'd like to bring another possible income coming in. Can you talk a little bit about the internet tax and how we're proceeding, or if we're collecting any, or can you give us an update?
Yes, it's hard to say a little about that, so if you'll indulge me a few extra minutes. First of all, the internet tax, that expression alone could be confusing. So let me kind of go down the two trails there so that we're all talking about the same thing. Because first there's what people, individuals, residences, and businesses pay to connect to the internet. So if you're a subscriber of, Comcast or Verizon or CenturyLink or any of these people, that's connection to the internet, and a sales tax is levied on that connection, and that's sunsetting. That's going to be a decrease early next decade for the city. So that's one internet tax. I want to make sure I don't think you want to talk about that, though. I think you want to talk about the sales tax on internet transactions. That's what you want to talk about. But I always like to clarify that, so thank you. This is interesting. It's quite less of an issue for the country, and also significantly less for Lakewood, Colorado, because, quite honestly, the vast majority, I couldn't give you a percentage, I could give you a range, but the vast percentage of sales of taxable items over the internet that are happening in Lakewood, we are collecting that sales tax because the Amazon Corporation is licensed with Lakewood. So anything that anybody buys in Lakewood from Amazon, that sales tax we are collecting. Now, we've been collecting that for over a year now. And let's face it, Amazon has the lion's share of it, but I will rattle off the rest of the companies that you might perceive as internet companies that Lakewood is collecting a sales tax on. So people like Apple Computer, people like Dell Computer, Zappos.com, all the big ones, they are now voluntarily, they've gotten a license, they're paying over that sales tax. So the concept of the internet tax to the Office of Budget at the City of Lakewood is far less concerning or interesting, to be honest with you. Now, at the federal level, this is still something that's interesting to some people, and I think there are some members of Congress who have proposed legislation in both the House of Representatives and in the Senate to do this Main Street Fairness Act or Marketplace Fairness Act. You may have heard about it, but it's been walking around Washington, D.C. now for at least 5 years with very little progress. And so what it would do is propose to require sales taxes at the state and local level on all internet transactions. So there are a few that are still out there. For example, if you buy a pair of shoes from somebody in the state of Texas through eBay and they ship them to your home, why that's not currently enforceable and the company is not licensed. But that's a very small percentage of what's happening. So does that help?
What's the percentage that we're starting to receive from internet tax?
That was the thing I wasn't going to give out or talk about a range, but I would tell you, based on my feeling for commerce and so forth, it's probably as high as 70 to 80+%, because Amazon and its affiliates and its major competitors, they really make up the lion's share of what we collect in Lakewood on sales tax.
Okay. That's all I needed to know.
Councilor Gutwein.
Just want to follow up on that. So it's about 70 or 80% roughly. Like
I have absolutely no research whatsoever to back that up.
That is the lion's share. That is interesting. Thank you. Well, thank you very much for this great presentation. I have a couple questions. First, could you just explain again about Colorado Mills and how, because they are exempt, we are not seeing the ratchet effect from Colorado Mills and what happened? I think this is important for everyone to understand.
Okay. Yes, I can do that. Thank you. Well, let me begin by talking about a time when the Colorado Mills and the land underneath it was not a part of the city of Lakewood. It was in unincorporated Jefferson County. Okay, so at the time, the owners of the property and the investors considered annexing that land into the city of Lakewood, and that was done by a vote. And at the time of that vote, the voters were also asked, shall all of the revenues from this geography, all of the revenues, be exempt from Tabor perpetually? And it was voted, the vote was very highly in favor of that. So that geography, so anything happening there is exempt from Tabor. So the way Tabor works is that government revenues from one year to the next year can only grow by inflation. They can't grow any more than that. That's all that's allowed. So when a revenue source that makes up 6% of the revenue goes down to, hypothetically, 0, and so you go from 100% of your revenue to 93.6, if I did the math right, well, you can only grow by inflation from that point forward. That's the ratchet effect that people are talking about. So if Mills closes for a year and then reopens, the total revenue of the city can only grow by inflation unless that revenue source were exempted via a vote, and that happens to be in this case. So I felt that was worth punctuating, because if not for that, then quite honestly, I would be deeply concerned about the city having to cut its budget over time to account for really what would amount to because keep in mind, we're cutting $2.7 million, but that's with it only being closed for 5 months. So if it's closed all year permanently, including the holidays, something onward of $7 million, and that would be impossible for the city to overcome without reducing spending at some point in the future. Did that help? I hope. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. And then my last question is, on page 59, hotel accommodation tax, and our revenue went down from 2016, and I am wondering if you have any idea why, and if that might have anything to do with people using Airbnb and other things like that?
Thank you. Yes, what we've done here is really just very conservatively, because this is a relatively small amount of total revenue, and because the Economic Development Fund, doesn't spend 97, 98, 99% of its revenue like the general fund, which is that's our charge. That's what we're supposed to do. However, the Economic Development Fund, which receives all of the hotel accommodations tax, really looks at its current year-to-date trends and makes its forecasts and changes accordingly. The other thing that I think is happening in this area, and I don't think Airbnb nearly has the impact necessarily, but I think what we're having is as the Fed Center continues to be strong and robust, people who come and do business that are federal workers, they're exempt from the city's hotel accommodation tax. So all of those stays that happen, there's no tax collected. So we could be seeing a bit of an imbalance in those as well. That's kind of what we're looking at.
Great, that's helpful. In that other discussion about Airbnb and whether or not we want to collect tax there, so I was just trying to understand if we're seeing an impact. But all right, that's all I had. Thank you very much.
Councilor Wickman?
Let me follow up on Councilor Roy Ball's internet question. As you know, over the years, we've had this issue about we have several zip codes that straddle different jurisdictions. And so it's always been kind of a question as to whether we're getting all of our tax or is a part of it going to Denver, et cetera. So you know the story. Now, my question is that situation improving, especially with the situation with Amazon? Because I could see where they could be confused as to who's in what zip code and all that sort of stuff. What's our status of our enforcement on that these days?
Well, thank you. Well, in the finance department, we have 7 full-time sales tax auditors. That's their mission. That's what they do all day, every day. Not just addresses, of course, but I think with the advancement in technology, number one, and then I will give some credit to the state legislature. They required some years ago that cities across the state produce what's called a certified address locator database. So all of the cities, oh my gosh, some years ago now, provided a list of all the addresses within the city's incorporated boundaries. That's available on the internet. So companies now can go out, download those addresses, and they know, even though we have something like 16 zip codes that cover the Lakewood geography. I think there are only 2 of those that are 100% within Lakewood. All of them share other boundaries, but I think companies have gotten. I know, having reviewed all of the tax audits that we do, that compliance with addresses is significantly higher than it once was. Of course, it's not perfect, but it's very, very good. And I think businesses have really caught up to this, and they have a lot less exposure. And I think things are going okay. Especially the internet companies know that they need to understand the addresses and which jurisdictions they're in. So I think we have very good compliance.
So before we go to motions or comments, is there any more questions? Okay. So now we can move on. Mr. Abel, do you want to make that motion?
I thought you wanted the copy.
No, just so we
Okay.
don't get confused with.
All right. I add that we add funding for a fireworks and community 4th of July event in the amount of whatever it was for the afternoon and evening show.
I'll second that.
Can I get the amount so I can fill it out here?
$75,000.
Okay.
And
Pardon me, Councilor Abel, for clarification, when you say afternoon and evening, are you mentioning is that the full day?
No.
Or is that the smaller one? So the smaller one is 75,000?
The economy version.
The economy version?
Yes.
So the 2 numbers, I believe, are 144,000 to 75,000.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? That's great. I would just say one thing as we go down the road. I think there's a lot of great information. I'm not sure where staff has engaged with Lakewood on Parade, but there's a lot of information, a lot of resources that those folks have after doing this for many years. So I would hope that that could be a resource for us, and potentially even something. I know people want to see it back, and maybe we could take that 75,000 and increase it to the full thing with somebody's help doing it.
And may I add that the folks over at Tri-State they worked with ACIC, I guess, and believe me, they want to sell us a show. They want the whole 9 yards. But they're very familiar with the facilities here and how things work, so Joe Diaz might be a great fellow to involve in that.
Great. Councilor Wickman?
I'm fully supportive, of course, but when you mentioned Lakewood on Parade, it's like, oh yeah, I just remembered. July 4th, we have that problem with the droughts, and we've had several years where our fireworks got canceled. What would happen if we got canceled? How would that affect the budget, or what would be the fiscal impact?
Oh, it would just be another savings. Yeah, that's a great example. We talk about savings that occurs throughout the course of the year, and those funds wouldn't be spent. Now, there may typically with a multi-year contract, there would be some cost to the vendor who, may have procured some of the supplies or whatever else that, that could occur. So there could be still some cancellation fee. I would probably expect that. Yeah.
And I can't recall, we used Western Enterprises out of Oklahoma. I can't recall, because the city actually did $20,000. That's what was our donation to Lakewood on Parade to help pay for the fireworks. And I don't recall the last year what kind of refund. I think we got most of it back, just for what it's worth. Ms. Gutwein.
This is a funny question, but does the 75,000 include the choreographed fireworks?
No, it doesn't.
The music.
May I?
It certainly could. One of the things that I should bring up, so just to set everybody's expectation, is that when the city spends an amount of funds of this size, there's an open competitive process related to the specifications that are set forth. So if the direction is to have a choreographed show and stay within $75,000, we will work up the specifications and get bids for such a thing. But I'm looking to Ms. Newland. I don't think that the business class, economy class version includes choreography. I don't think it does.
I think it does.
I believe, after speaking with these folks at length today, that when you get up around the $1,500 a minute, $2,000 a minute level, that choreography comes with it.
Very well.
And I believe that when we had it at the stadium, it was choreographed.
I think it will all fall in line.
Okay. I like the choreographed. So, I think at first I'm a little concerned about adding new things when we're at a revenue loss. But I like that we're looking at doing, starting out with the smaller level, and then we could someday build up. So thank you.
Councilor Shakti.
I agree. I like the idea of starting at the smaller number, and I just want to add, in terms of the partnering with the community and the donations and things they put in, to the extent we can work around the Tabor complications there. I don't know if they could be somehow independent, or I wouldn't want to see huge donations made to this event that meant we had a lot less money for other things because of the Tabor implications. So
thank you. So we have a motion and a second. Please cast your votes. And that passes 11 ayes, 0 nays. And that is to move us towards the $75,000 projected festival somewhere around the 4th, I think is where that is. And then the second part, just to refresh, we had something else that moved forward 2 weeks ago as well. Was that the energy audit, or was that the money purchase? There was something else I had to get direction from council on, and I'm drawing a blank.
No direction needed. We will have three. There are three items on your agenda for October 30th.
No,
in addition.
But we had a consensus on moving an item forward, and I don't remember if it had to do with the employee pension, or it was the.
I think
we have
Mayor-
to have a separate resolution. That
Oh,
must have been what it
and
was.
that's on your agenda for the 30th. I did mention, Mayor, forgive me, maybe one of the things you were interested in is, as a result of the study session and that change, the police department participants needed to conduct a worker vote as to whether or not to increase the police officer contributions to the pension. I should report to you that was done since September 18th, and it was like 99% voted in favor. 98, 90 something.
So that was the other S. So we are moving forward with the budget as is with this, and then everything else that's in there. And okay, thank you. Well done. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Will the clerk please read the consent agenda?
Mayor, I still need a motion to accept the
We got to vote on.
ordinance as amended.
No,
It was first reading.
it's first reading. I thought we
First
do that.
reading and order it published in the Denver Post for second reading to be held.
Well, look at you.
Yes.
You say so, then.
Well, we can you're the boss. You tell us.
I second.
Mayor Paul, I move that ordinance 2017-13 introduced on first reading be published in the Denver Post with a second and final public hearing set for October 30th, 2017.
Second.
All
We
right.
say that's as amended.
As amended.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion as amended to move the ordinance 2017-13 to second public hearing and final reading. All right. Please cast your votes. No. Display. 11 ayes, 0 nays. So now we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Mayor, we'll see you in 3 weeks.
3
I
weeks.
mentioned earlier that
Well, it's a fifth Monday.
it
yes.
is. Yeah, we want to allow a little more time for
Yes.
public input, et cetera. So 3 weeks for the budget, and council will also have a meeting in 2 weeks on the 23rd.
And in 1 week. All right. Madam Clerk, will you please read the consent
The
agenda?
consent agenda consists of items 8 through 10 inclusive. Item 8, Ordinance O 2017-14, authorizing and ratifying the City of Lakewood entering into an annually renewable lease purchase agreement between All American Investment Group LLC as leaseor and the city as leasee for the purpose of financing the acquisition of certain energy conservation improvements, equipment, and controls intended to result in energy conservation savings in certain public building used by the City of Lakewood, to conduct its governmental business, authorizing the execution of documents related thereto. Item 9, approving the minutes of the regular city council meetings of July 10th, August 14th, and August 28th, all 2017. And item 10, accepting the minutes of the Advisory Commission for Inclusive Communities Executive Committee meeting of August 2nd, 2017, and their full commission meetings of July 19th and August 16th, both 2017.
So I will take a motion on the consent agenda.
Actually,
Am I off here? We have a public hearing. Nobody's signed up to speak. And it's only a first reading, so there is none. So just a motion. Yep.
Yep.
There you go.
Mayor Paul, I move for the approval of council minutes for acceptance of the minutes and boards and commissions, and order all ordinances introduced on first reading to be published in the Denver Post with public hearing set for the date included in the ordinance, and all of which are included in the consent agenda, including introduced into the record by the city clerk.
Second.
Great. Motion and a second. Any discussion? All right. Seeing none, please cast your votes. That passes 11 ayes, 0 nays. All right, next up, general business, executive report. Ms. Hodson?
Yes, thank you. I do actually have a few things.
Hold 1 second. Do you have general business, Ms. Johnson?
I just had one question, and it's because I've been asked several times lately. When may the city anticipate an ordinance for the shopping carts?
Thank you for that. We are getting closer. Our Public Works Director is in charge, and he's the lead person. We've got some good information. We've been doing some research on other organizations that have this kind of issue in their city. So I hope to have that on the schedule pretty soon. I don't have a date certain, but as soon as we do, we'll let you know.
Thank you.
We're getting closer.
Thank you.
Ms. Hodson, you're still up.
Oh, thank you. I actually have a few things. First of all, I was just thrilled to be a part of a recognition. Our own Kit Newland, who is the Community Resources Director, she was recently honored. She received the Colorado Parks and Recreation, CPRA's Fellow Award. That's the highest honor you can receive. The award recognizes a parks and recreation professional who excels in leadership, strategic thinking and planning, partnership building, innovation, and service. Again, it's the highest honor bestowed on a member, according to CPRA. This took place last Thursday. I was privileged to be asked by the staff to present the award to her in front of the whole state delegation. Several hundred people, I think there were 400 to 500 people there, and we were able to surprise the heck out of Miss Newland, and her entire family attended. Somehow they got her 3 adult sons and their families and her sister as well. So congratulations to Kit Newland.
Hey, look at that. Nice.
How nice, thank you.
Awesome.
Gosh, that was a big honor. A little more detail on Colorado Mills Mall. As we have discussed over time, the tenants with the exterior entrances such as Yoga Pod, Dick's Sporting Goods, Yard House, Super Target, Jump Street, the United Artists Stadium, and IMAX, they've all been open to the public. They're working so hard to get almost the entire mall open for business by Black Friday. In fact, they're hoping some of these tenants will be able to open before Black Friday, mid-November. So when you come to visit the mall, you won't see 100% tenants open, nor will you see complete finishes in terms of the work, floors, ceilings, walls, etc. But they are working diligently and getting close. So we hope to see a soft opening near mid-November, which is good news for the mills. On another note, you might have been surprised to hear that the 59-acre Federal Center property had been in a part of a process called a public auction. And because of an injunction that was filed by the Colorado Coalition for the Homeless, the auction actually was canceled, and the Colorado Coalition for the Homeless has 30 days to submit their intentions and to be able to demonstrate their ability to do 2 things. First of all, plan for the entire 59-acre site, as well as demonstrate that they have the capital to do that. So there's a 30-day review right now. Again, the auction itself has been canceled for now, and the 30-day review is going to be conducted by the housing HHS. Health and Human Services, thank you. So it's no longer with HUD, which is interesting. It's the Health and Human Services, which will be doing that review. And I have asked the folks from GSA to keep us informed, as this is a property within the city of Lakewood. The actual clock for the 30 days started October 6th, which I think was last Friday. So they have 30 days, and then we'll see if the Coalition for the Housing is able to meet that threshold, and if not, we'll find out what their next plan is, and I'll make sure you're aware of that, because I know that's of great interest to all of you.
Ms. Hodson, on that too, I might add, what I learned from this process is if the federal government does then engage, and if they don't sell the property, our zoning is null and void. But if they do sell the property, then they're still subject to our zoning.
That's accurate. And we can talk further in more detail about that. Okay, so I was asked, I think by Councilor Wickman, to talk a little bit about the emergency management program. And although we haven't been able to find a study session, here's the next best thing. I'll be sending out a written update by Jesse Miller, who is our emergencies operation manager, and it's pretty thorough in terms of all of the things that we do in this particular office. And then we will schedule a study session with to talk about this, as well as we're going to be doing another council training of emergency response like we did, I don't know, 6 or 8 months ago in the event of some horrible situation here and what you do. We'll wait until we have a new council. So again, Councilor Wickman, we're going to invite you to come and enjoy that study. So thank you. Finally, this is a long report. Thank you. This is my final piece, and that is we have an upcoming agenda item on October 30th that you may have seen on the calendar, and the resolution is to solicit funding or a grant for the Taylor property. The reason we do this is because whenever we try to get grant funds, we have to get approval first from this body, and we have to do this for open space as well as Great Outdoors Colorado, otherwise known as GOCO. We've recently received the indication that we may be able to have a real estate transaction for a portion of this property. We will be entering into an executive session next week with the transaction details for you. That if you approve this, that executive session will be held next Monday at 5:30, and we'll give you all the details on that potential real estate transaction. So that's a little more detail about what you've read on the agenda. And with that, Mayor, I'm done.
Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll go to reports. Mayor Pro Tem Harrison.
Thank you very much. I would just like to say thank you to all the people in Ward 5 who attended our discussion about the Strategic Growth Initiative last Saturday. We had a tremendous turnout. We had probably about, I think about 60 people that were there. We had speakers from both sides, and the discussion was lively and yet civil. If any of the other counselors would like to know what we put in the coffee to help make that happen, I'd be happy to help you with that. But we had a process that I think worked really well. So let us know. And I just wanted to tell everybody thank you for attending. It was delightful to have the discussion that we did and be able to learn, and both sides come out with really good information. So thank you very much for those who attended.
So just a quick clarification, Ms. Greer, can we continue with reports and then come back to the motion? All right. Council President.
I have no
Rebel?
report.
Okay. Councilor Shakti.
First, can I say I'm so happy to hear about the Taylor property movement. That discussion started when I started on council, and I'm about to go off council, and it's nice to see it come around. So. And also, cleanup day, I think coming up on Saturday, lakewood.org/cleanup. You can get the information. It's with the thrift store. And then Friends of Paha is hosting a pumpkin patch at the City of Lakewood's Haunted Trail Adventure at Lakewood Park. The proceeds go to Camp Paha, and it's Saturday the 14th from 4 to 7.
Just a correction, I think that's Bear Creek Lake Park.
What did I say?
Lakewood.
Okay, thank
There's
you.
no haunted trails over there. Counselor Johnson.
No report.
Counselor Abel.
No report.
Counselor Vincent.
Ward 2's meeting is 7:30 this Wednesday at 1580 Teller.
Counselor Coop. Counselor Wickman.
We're having our town hall meeting this Saturday, 9:30 at the church. It's going to be a forum for the candidates. We have 3 candidates running for my seat. I kept it warm. And we're asking if anybody has any questions you want to ask the candidates. Let's get them organized. So, please send them to Barb or I by Friday, and we'll get them organized and we can ask all the questions at once. Thank you.
Counselor Gutwein.
Thank you. Kit, so well deserved. Congratulations. That's awesome. And then I meant to make a comment about the budget, but then the moment kind of passed after we did the questions. But I just want to say that this time of year always makes me feel really proud of our city and of our amazing staff. And I will probably thank you again at the next one. But thank you so much for all the hard work and being such great stewards of our taxpayer dollars. And that is all.
Counselor Franks.
I too wanted to acknowledge the staff. Mr. Dorr and his staff has been amazing at helping me kind of learn the budget process. Didn't have a lot of questions this time because they've done such a great job through all the sessions, really preparing us, and we know how to look at things and how to contrast things. And that really does help. I mean, and I think that at first I was a little uncomfortable being on the committee because I didn't think I had a lot to offer, but with that education you really make every counselor able to contribute. So I wanted to thank you guys.
Well said, and I'd like actually to thank all the council members and citizens who are on the Budget and Audit Committee for their hard work. And it can be a little daunting, but I think everybody's done great once you jump in and get in there. So thank you all for your service. I have a couple different announcements. The Jefferson County mayors, we actually went to lunch at the Yard House today to help support Colorado Mills, and they had a nice lunch service going, which was really cool. And then Cider Days, another great event, got a lot of positive feedback, so well done for that. Lakewood Development Dialogue continues. That started last month with 3 open houses, and now they're moving into a public meeting stage with the Planning Commission, and so those will all be open, and you can continue to be involved at lakewood.org/LDD, and I encourage everybody to continue to stay involved and be part of that process. It's election time, so you're going to be getting ballots, I think, go out on Monday-ish, so get those in, and always all kinds of information out there, so do your best to just go right to the source, which is those folks who are running, and best of luck to everybody who's running. And last but certainly not least, had a really cool event last week, and that was, we did a groundbreaking over a year ago, right, Scott? At 40 West Residences, and now we did their grand opening, and so we received this plaque. But the cool part about this is that in 2012, Archway Housing purchased the parcel of land at 5830 West Colfax, which used to be the Sunset Motel? Yeah, Sunset Motel. The old Sunset Motel. With plans of constructing a new affordable housing development. They worked on this for over 5 years, had a lot of different funders, and here's the best part of it. It's a 4-story, 46,000-ish square foot building comprised of 54 one-bedroom and 6 two-bedrooms. 25 of those units are set aside for homeless veterans. So it was a really cool day. Councilor Coop was there. Councilor Vincent was not able to make it, but she sent her best. And the Elks Club actually put together 25 welcome home packages for those veterans with everything from sheets to dishes, coffee makers, all of that. So it's a beautiful complex, and it's really, really exciting. Congratulations to them, and welcome our new residents who will be moving in. So with that, we have one last business item, and that is a motion that Council President Roybal is going to make to set the special meeting next week for an executive session.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to hold a special meeting on Monday, October 16th, 2017 at 5:30 p.m. in the CMO conference room for the purpose of holding an executive session to discuss the status of a possible purchase of property by the city and to receive reports from city negotiators on the status of negotiations pursuant to Section 2.15, parentheses C, parentheses 2, and parentheses 3 of the Lakewood Home Rule Charter.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Please cast your votes. Passes 11 ayes, 0 nays, so we'll be back. Thank you all for coming out, hang out. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, I missed one important note, and that is we will be offering a tree and limb pickup for the recent storm. Some of your wards have been more impacted than others, depending on where the big trees are. And those will be October 14th and 21st, 8 to noon. We'll put the information on the website, but this is our standard tree and limb pickup where greenhouse? Over at the greenhouse off of Yale, yeah. About Yale and Estes-ish. But we'll put all that information on the website. Again, 8 to noon, October 14th and 21st. You can drop your damaged trees and limbs. Thank you.
All right. Anything else for the good of the order? We will adjourn at 9:05. Agent Hunt, thank you very much for being with us. And we will see you later.